Hello and welcome to Rough Cut Film Review. This is part one of I don't know how many parts of my Harry Potter special. So this is off the back of the relative success of my Bond special I did a few months back. The Christmas special died a death because I saw a few Christmas films and I thought, well, apart from, saying, well, these are the common themes, I like this Christmas film, I don't like this Christmas film, I couldn't really see the point of doing it, so that's gone. A new, year in review 2012. That's probably on the cards, but I'm not as enthusiastic as I was about 2011, and I'm sure there's. I just get the terrible feeling there were some really good films that I didn't see, and and therefore I can't include. So it's a bit thin on the ground. So anyway, here we go. Harry Potter special, and we're off. So, what was my pre-existing relationship with Harry Potter? Well, I've been dragged by girls almost certainly to see most of the films. I think I was also forced to read at least one of the books. I vaguely remember reading The Order of the Phoenix, and pretty much my opinion of Harry Potter before I started this was that it was clever enough to make a load of money. It just wasn't for me. I wasn't its demographic. I was a little bit too old and a little bit too bitter and twisted and all that kind of thing. But there we go. So before I start, it's worth mentioning that I'm going to try and judge all these films on their own merits and the series as a whole, the franchise as you might call it, on its own merits. So, for example, I know that particularly the first couple are aimed at children, and so I'm not going to be judging them in the same way in which I judge Pulp Fiction. I think to a certain extent you can get away with a bit more with kids' films in terms of things like plot holes. But fundamentally, I'm still looking for good films. I'm looking for well-made, well-crafted, well-acted films that look great. And I think that kids are very smart, and they're no fools. And there's a good reason that good children's stories have stood the test of time for so many years. Harry Potter has engaged an awful lot of these, now young adults, really, I suppose. But I think I'm very mindful of the fact that so many people think so highly of this. So I'm not approaching this as a big fan. I'm someone with a mild interest, I think is fair to say. I'm not someone that's going to get upset that, oh, hang on a second, in such and such scene, Harry's glasses should have been a different colour. Or, I'm not going to pick that kind of holes because I've no idea, and also I'm trying to judge the films on their own merits. So I'm trying to see a good film, not a good Harry Potter film, as sort of I went on with The Lord of the Rings. So I do find it really interesting, actually, that a single mum, I think, from Edinburgh has become effectively wealthier than God on the back of writing these books. She's a big supporter of the Labour Party in the UK, which is the left-leaning party. But she's made this, her wealth is based on what is a very conservative book, really. I mean, it's a very conservative world they live in. Hogwarts is obviously the preserve of the upper class elite, and I know that in the story there are some sort of class issues there, but they're fairly subtle, and I find all that stuff very interesting. So it's interesting that she didn't write a book on Wayne, who is raised in working class Glasgow, and instead of magic every day he downs bottles of Buckfast, and he smokes Lambert and Butlers, and he gets Shaz pregnant and lies about it, and wants to be a footballer. It's interesting that that's the story we've got. I mean, I think Harry Potter really reflects British society extremely well. So there's 90% of the world going around and working and drinking lattes and canned beer and buying lottery tickets, and then there's sort of the 10% or however many it is doing posh things like fox hunting, and all this stuff goes on behind the background. So there's suddenly we're all muggles going around in our surf world, and then suddenly there's this magical upper class type who has elves as house slaves and doesn't understand how a free market works. Why is it rich people never have any money on them? I mean, it's it's that kind of thing, really. And then there's Hagrid, who's the mild-mannered sort of dog's body, chirpy servant. Anyway, and Mr. Weasley, he's a poor but sort of chipper civil servant as well. Anyway, I'm rambling on about class stuff, which I didn't really mean to get into. So, but it's also what I find interesting about Rowling is the fact that she's written book where the protagonist is a boy. It's not Henrietta Potter or something like that. If I was going to make a protagonist, I would make a boy, because obviously I don't understand girls at all. If I made a protagonist who was a girl, inevitably she'd be probably in her mid-20s and pretty sexy, and it would probably end up not quite as bad, but nearly as bad as Sucker Punch. You know, the Zack Snyder ridiculous, stupid. So the sort of character that it would be about as relatable as Osama bin Laden I'd probably have, and she'd probably end up being a stripper. But I'd make her a vet or something as well to make her a bit more relatable. Anyway, right, Hogwarts. So there are. The structure on this is all over the place. So it's interesting that there are 4 houses that can be assigned in Harry Potter, in Hogwarts. If you're given Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff, that basically means that you're just going to stand in the background of other people's lives and be lucky for it. If you're in Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff, you will have literally nothing to do. If you get assigned, with the magic hat, Gryffindor, then you're the hero. Everyone will root for you, and whether you deserve it or not, you'll be the darling of the school. Everyone will think you're great. If you end up with Slytherin, which quite frankly I'd quite like to get Slytherin if I went to Hogwarts, you'll end up being the kid that pulls legs off spiders and takes it from there, really. So clearly it's I don't really know why the people that run Hogwarts aren't a bit more careful about that, to be honest, because essentially if you're in Slytherin, you're sort of one off the Antichrist, and they really need to keep a handle on that, because you start pulling the legs off spiders, and then maybe you hurt a cat, and then 20 years later you're hunting the deadliest game of them all. Anyway, more rambling going on there. So what I found interesting about Harry Potter is it seems like about 95% of the magic types are either secretly Death Eaters, or a complete coward, a complete idiot, or are various degrees of irritating, or they can be actually a combination of those things. So it's Death Eater, coward, idiot, irritating. There's those 4 denominations. And also, as much as people love Dumbledore, he's clearly completely incompetent at keeping any of the kids safe, and it's a wonder that those kids are not traumatised. If the books ended up running on for any longer, then Hogwarts would definitely be sort of at the centre of a Catholic Church style scandal, because there's so much stuff going on there that's completely Anyway, I think throughout the films, generally speaking, there's some very good plot twists, but there are also some rather confusing contrivances as well. I like the fact as they go through, they don't keep repeating what everything is. So, they don't say, oh, we're going back. We don't get these Basil exposition moments in it where they go, oh, we've got to go back to such and such a place. Oh, that's the place where something happened. They're perfectly happy to let you go along with it. And bear in mind, most people will have read the books. They really don't need that kind of prodding. So that was really, really good. Common themes throughout. So we've got, it is very, very similar to old British Hammer horrors. We've got stuff in there, obviously there's adventure and mild horror, I think is fair to say. As it goes on, the horror picks up a bit, and actually by the end of it, it's fairly, not fierce, but it's not tame stuff. We've got friendship in there, family, adolescence, teenage angst, and just basically the pains of growing up, but with magic. There's also stuff in there about sort of fascism and racism and blood purity and all this kind of thing, and slavery and elves and all that kind of thing. So it's quite an interesting, it's a very interesting world that Rowling has made, and she's done it by cleverly cherry picking from other sources that have been around a very long time without ever actually copying anyone. I've managed to make the first video already. I've made very little actual salient points here. It's all been a bit slapdash. Second part, I'm going into the films, starting with the first one, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So we're going to get a bit more structure back and actually rein this in a little bit. Kind regards.